see if it will. All right. So once again, my name is Evangelist Keisha Atoy, and I am here this evening to share with you amazing family, I would say. Tony Webb is actually one of my sisters in Christ that I met as she spoke to during the Citizens Police Academy, Clayton County Citizens Police Academy, beautiful organization where we learn so much, and human trafficking is actually one of the classes that they spoke to. So we know that actually law enforcement is involved, but we also know that sometimes they can be on the other end of that. Government officials, law enforcement, Christian organizations and other organizations may not be a part of the elimination or the eradication of sexual exploitation, but some of these entities, and we have the good and we have the bad. So some of them are supporting it. It is an industry. When we speak to sex trafficking and human trafficking and all of that, it is actually an industry that is $39.9 million industry, the commercial sex economy. And that is just talking about in Georgia. Yeah, so you can imagine, right? So you can imagine all over the world what that looks like. Wow. So I know, right? So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. All right, so you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, all right, again, as I stated before, I represent Bondage Breakers Ministry Global, BBMG, and I have been in this fight to eradicate the commercial sexual exploitation of children for about 7 or 8 years. And as I said before, aligned with several organizations, and the organization that I'll be sharing information with you from, and that is Wellspring Living, for the integrity of their information, and then give you an opportunity. My prayer is that you will be moved to do something. If it's not just recognizing the signs, but saying something when you see something. So I want to just kind of let you know, this is the disclaimer. Once I share this information with you and you have become aware, you then as well become a mandated reporter. And what does that mean? When you see something, you say something. But you have to recognize the signs first to know what it actually looks like. Okay, and again, Wellspring Living, this is their information that I will be sharing with you this evening. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about sex trafficking, as it were. What is sex trafficking? Who can be victimized and how can it happen? The statistics, action steps, volunteering with Wellspring Living, and the Wellspring Living Treasures. And that's some of the retail stores and different ways that you can get involved. And then we'll have questions and answers. So please do write down your questions because I will have answers. Okay, so before I actually go and delve into this, it's here on the screen for you, but is there anyone that can just tell me what you believe sex trafficking is?
Anyone?
Sex trafficking, I guess when somebody is taken and is forced to do something against their will, like sexually or anything that, especially if they're underage, and I guess adults can be sex trafficked too, because as we've seen on TV and different things, but been taken and forced to do things that they don't want to do, whether it be sexual or stealing or whatever it is that somebody's making them do that they don't want to do, and they could be trafficked in all kind of ways.
Absolutely. And you know, most oftentimes people have the myth in their minds that trafficking is, and I'm not using commercial. Commercial means buying, product, selling, buying, supply. Okay. But sex trafficking happens in so many different ways, and there's a grooming process. And in our communities, it happens right in our homes. It happens right next doors. It's happening in the schools. It's happening online. And we want to keep our children safe. And the reality is that we want to begin to share with our children what that looks like at a very early age, because it is not only the adults or the creepy man with the big white kidnapping truck that's doing this, but it is individuals that are their age mates that are being sexually exploited, that are going in and recruiting other children. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I paused there as early as middle school. And so, of course, then in high school, and some of these children are being exploited by their parents. They're being exploited by, for instance, if they are in, and I really don't want to get into deep with, you know, the myth that it is just children that are being adopted or in foster care.
Mhm.
It's happening in our homes. It is cousins, it is uncles, it is sisters, it is brothers, it is mothers, it is fathers that are sexually exploiting, which is the grooming process, or selling their children for gain. And the exchange of anything of value. So the first thing you want to think is money, right? Of course. However, anything of value, it can be, you know, something like food, shelter, drugs. You value affection and attention. So, you know, girls and boys, let's not leave the boys out of it, because regionally, where we are here in Georgia, the statistics that they say that 1 in 4 girls are being exploited every day or will be sexually exploited by the age of 18, and 1 in 6 boys, that number and the ratio is really going up for boys because of our region. And when I say that in different regions, you know that there is more of certain types of behavior, and I'm not sure what the ages are of the young people that we have watching. But Sister Tony, if you can just verify that.
Oh, they are 9, 13, 14, and 16. How old are they, you guys? Oh,
So the youngest is 8.
That's correct.
oh that's correct.
I'm
Okay.
16.
Yeah.
Period.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And so the youngest is 8. Okay. So, and then we have a parent there.
The youngest is 9.
The youngest is 9. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So I just want to make sure that the phraseology that I'm using, that it's friendly for younger children.
Okay.
And just to allude to some of the things that's taking place when it comes to, and of course, it's so important too, as I said before, to go ahead and start talking to your children now. And in reality, a child at the age of 9 really should understand the terminology when it comes to what sex is and body parts, and the terminology that's used, and not just the slang, but when you speak to personal parts such as the vagina, such as the penis, such as breast, and sex, the act of sex inside and outside of marriage. What is your safe zones? What's safe for you, and who's allowed to enter your space? We want to talk about, when I mentioned the boys, we are looking at individuals that are truly being exploited in a horrific way, along with the girls and along with the women, because I think Minister Watkins may mention too that it's adults as well, and that's correct. We want to focus on those who are the most vulnerable among us, as well as women who are in this life, maybe by choice and not. So it takes on so many different forms. Transgender children, boys who are not homosexual, but they have a need. Because remember, we talked about sex trafficking is an exchange of something of value. And a lot of times you will see the young boys that are in school and high school and now in middle school that may be exploited by someone, and we would call them a panderer, and what they used to call them as a John. They may not actually be trafficked, but they may be meeting older men, and these older men are taking them shopping, and they're promising them things because maybe they want the latest Jordans, or they want, there's certain things that they will promise them, but then they'll tell them that doesn't mean that you are, with your sexuality, that you are homosexual or that you're gay. It doesn't even mean that you're bisexual. And we can keep this between us. So we have a lot of that happening with the boys. So I want to make mention of that. Wellspring Living actually caters to the girls, but I want to make sure that I touch on the fact that the boys are being exploited just as well as the girls, and the same effects that it have on the girls, it's having on the boys. It just may look a little bit different in ways that they're exploited, but it's still sexual exploitation. And this is done in exchange for something most oftentimes of value. It could even just be affection. And with the girls, you will see the vulnerabilities in areas where they think that they are dating this individual. They may be introduced to an older guy and they say this is their boyfriend, and they lure them in, coerce them, and they get them caught up in a situation that they don't feel that they can get out of, or they're ashamed of it, where they then begin to, they call it sextortion. And sextortion is where they coerce them, or they have them to send pictures of themselves because they felt like they were in a relationship with this person, and they threaten to use it against them. So they call it sextortion. Okay, so what is sex trafficking? The exchange of a sexual act done for something of value. And what does it involve? It involves violence, threats, lies, debt, bondage, or other forms of coercion used by sex traffickers to force adults and children to engage in commercial acts against their will. And when we say commercial, I really want to echo that it is not always commercial. Again, in our communities, a lot of times I think, and I would say for me, with my story, because most oftentimes that what becomes a part of what you do in your life, and I would call it ministry, it is derived out of something that you've experienced. And as a small child around the age of 6, and my sister was around the age of 3, we were sexually exploited by my stepfather. And that was the grooming process. So that kind of went on, because then I would say in the bloodline per se, in my family lineage, a lot of my cousins and other individuals in the family were as well being sexually exploited and being sexually abused. And so what happened? That then re-perpetuated itself. So then the older children would sexually exploit the younger children, and it just kind of re-perpetuated itself. And so nowadays, kids, I'm not sure what they're calling it now, that they were playing house, or they were doing certain things with their friends or with their cousins, and they called it playing house. And this is especially for the younger children in the room. And then some of us can think back on things that happened to us with friends and with possibly relatives, and didn't know how to ID it or identify it. And of course, this is that grooming process that I speak to, where there was no money exchange, but my innocence and my sister's innocence and some of my other relatives' innocence was taken from them. Okay, so again, sex trafficking can involve, and it doesn't have to mean movement, because when you hear trafficking, you hear movement. It can be right in a home where, and I keep going back to certain things because I feel a pull in certain areas. It could mean that an individual could be being trafficked right out of their home. Right out of their home. And they've never left the state or the vicinity or their region. That happens a lot. Most oftentimes individuals who are trafficked, like I said before, it is not about the big kidnapping ban, or even what we know today is they may put some tissue on your door and you're at the mall. Of course, you want to be aware of that, right? Definitely be aware of that, because that is happening. But most oftentimes it's going to be someone that that individual knows, or someone in school, or someone that they're familiar with that will coerce them or will lure them into this life of being sexually trafficked and then sexually exploited and commercially trafficked. All right. And we definitely want to look at individuals who are in high school, girls that are going to what they call kickbacks and feeling as if, you know, they don't have another choice. I was, you know, a story was shared with me about a young lady who was living with her mom and her stepfather, and her mother went to jail for something. And she was 13. She was left there with her mother's boyfriend. I don't think it was her stepfather per se by marriage, but she was left there with her mother's boyfriend. So then he began to exploit her. And what that looked like, it wasn't, from what the information that was shared with me in this story, is that it wasn't something where she was raped per se, but he then slowly groomed her. He would buy her things. He would tell her how beautiful she was. And he would then, you know, tell her things. So cognitively, she was unable to fully process what was really happening to her, because she didn't feel like she was being trafficked. She didn't feel like she was being harmed. She felt like this man loved her because he would buy her things and he would, you know, do things for her. And at some point, you know, over time, this man started to bring in other men. So she ran away. And then she was introduced to strip clubs. A lot of young people, women in particular, feel like if I go to a strip club and I begin to strip, that's not exploitation, because I'm voluntarily doing this thing because I want to pay my college fees. And that's something that some young ladies feel like this is exempt. But the reality is all of these things are sexual exploitation. And this young lady, by the time she started stripping, she was 15, and she used a fake ID. The reality is that they really don't care. They don't care how young they are. They don't care, you know, whether they technically have an ID or not. And so then men were coming in and they were purchasing her from the strip clubs. And as we know, in Atlanta, we have, in Georgia per se, there's a lot of those strip clubs out there. And these young people, or these individuals, are underage. There are some that may not be underage, but most of them will be underage. They may not look it, but they are. And so legally, they cannot engage in commercial sex acts or even be forced or coerced into it. Okay. And as I said before, when you think of trafficking, you think of overseas, or you think of them moving them from place to place. They do that, but it does not require physical movement from place to place. And under the US federal law, any person under the age of 18 induced into commercial sex is a victim of sex trafficking, regardless of whether or not the trafficker used force, fraud, or coercion. Who can be a victim of trafficking? As I explained, as early as the age of 6, my sister and I were sexually exploited. We weren't trafficked per se because the stepfather was not receiving money for what he was doing, but anyone can be a victim of sex trafficking. And it starts out with the grooming process that I just spoke to in my situation, in the young lady situation who ended up in a strip club at the age of 15. And then also women who are out there speaking to adults, as Minister Watkins spoke to, women who are out there that get pregnant with babies and the babies are born into that life. So babies, and there have been stories of, or facts of babies who were trafficked, months old, days old, was sexually exploited and trafficked, okay? So it spans all demographics. It's not about the economical status. It is not about the color or the creed or the race or the gender. It spans all of these specific demographics. It spans, you know, where you live in the area that you live in, because the reality is that these people are doing this more and more online. As I said before, it looks different. You're not necessarily going to see someone standing on a corner on Fulton Industrial. I don't know if you know, we're familiar with that, but you're not necessarily going to see that anymore. You're going to, once you start to really understand what it looks like now, and the face that it has changed to now, is they call them appointments. They will traffic these individuals, girls and boys, or women and men, and you won't hear me talking about the women and men as much because we're talking about underage trafficking right now, domestic minor trafficking. They are trafficking them not just out of hotels, they do that, which they call traps. They are trafficking them out of Airbnbs. They will rent out these Airbnbs and they will sexually traffic their victims, or what they would call their supply. And when you think of supply, you also think of demand. There would be no supply if there wasn't a demand, if there wasn't a buyer. So some circumstances or vulnerabilities lead to a higher susceptibility to victimization and exploitation, such as the history of being a runaway, sexual assault or domestic violence. So when I talk about the sexual assault that my sister and I experienced when we were very young, and some of my other relatives experienced when they were very young, it can lead to that, and a lot of individuals who run away because of that. So domestic violence, any type of abuse can be a grooming process for this. It can be verbal abuse, it can be physical abuse, it can be mental abuse. And when I say physical, that means beatings and all of these different things. So, and all encompassing the sexual abuse. Homeless youth and substance abuse. So individuals who may sell their children because they are on drugs, because remember, something of value. Doing a favor for someone. And at times, you know, it's very difficult to share what you've gone through that looks like this, but this is what, you know, this is the way that it can bring it home for you, so that you can see when you look at a person, you can't just see it. You just have to know what their story is and what they've gone through, so that you don't have a misconception of who could be and what that would look like, the faces of sexual exploitation. At the age of 13, I was dressed up and I was sent on a date. And of course, you wouldn't send your children on a date. I would not do that. at that early age of 13. This lady asked if she could take me on a date with her and her boyfriend. And I was to meet his brother, who was supposedly the age of 15. They were supposed to take us out to eat and to the movies. That's what they told my mother. But I found myself on an army base in one of their rooms. And of course, I couldn't really truly identify, exactly where I was and all of that. I'm riding with them. I'm 13 years old. And I find myself in this room with this boy, and the woman that was trusted to take me said, "It's okay. You can go in there with him. You all are just going to talk." So I will leave it there. And, the rest is a part of the history, a part of her story, my story. So this is what this can look like. So when we trust our children with other individuals, and they say that they're going to do certain things, we have to be mindful of that. The recruitment strategies that they use, seduction and coercion. Also, there is another story of an individual young girl whom she was being sexually exploited by her father. And her father then used her. So this is then for the boys again, to be mindful and be very careful who you are talking with online, and parents to get involved and not just allow your children to just have free reign. But there should be some parental controls when we're keeping our kids safe in a digital age. This young lady, not certain what her age was, but she was like a school age young girl. And she was luring in boys. The boys thought that they were dating this young girl. So the father was sexually exploiting the young girl, his daughter. And he then used the daughter to lure these boys. And so when the boys would show up to the doorstep for a date or to visit with the young girl that they thought online with her picture and all of these things and the conversation she was having, they thought that they were going to meet this young girl. So once they came to the door, who did they find? They found the father. After the young girl lured them in, the father would come out and he would bring the boys in, and then he would sexually abuse the boys. And I'm gonna just leave it at that. So I want you all to really, any type of misconceptions that you would have about what it could look like to be sexually exploited or the commercial sexual exploitation of children, CSEC, I want you to open up your minds and begin to, see outside of what the status quo before would say, that this is only happening to people overseas, or it's just the kidnapping bans or things like that. But it is happening in ways that's so horrific, and it's not getting better. However, if we continue to do what we're doing and we get the word out and we get involved and we recognize what the grooming process looks like, and we see something and we say something, we bring that awareness to our children, we sit our children down to talk to them about the dangers of individuals, what they would call catfishing, or individuals who are going on there. If they play a lot of games, they do a lot of gaming, these people will imitate, or they will pretend to be a young girl or a young boy to lure them in. And once they lure them outside of their homes, and that's when it begins. And some young people might say, well, I have my cell phone, I'll scream, I'll yell, I'll do all of those things. Well, if they get you in the car, and absolutely you want to scream, you want to yell, you want to do all of these things, but don't willingly leave your home and go with someone. Don't willingly do that. And parents, get involved. There is no privacy in my home. There is none. So we all, if you have to hide it, and if I can't see it and you don't want me to see it, then you could possibly be in danger. Because they are doing more of this seducing and coercion via the internet online. And that's why this thing is crossing all of the demographic lines, but it is actually online now, heavily online. So seduction, coercion, inducing, exploits, substance abuse issues, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, intimidation, threats, internet and social media, false promises, fraud, peer recruitment, gangs, and of course, kidnapping. Human trafficking across the United States. Of the nearly 26,300 runaways reported in 2019, and we're in 2023 right now, but in 2019, 1 in 6 were likely victims of child sex trafficking. Yes. Since 2000, 30% of all victims identified in federal sex trafficking cases were recruited online. And according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 81% of sex trafficking victims were brought in by someone intimately close to them. And those were the statistics in 2020, and we're in 2023, and this thing is growing by leaps and bounds by the day. This horrific epidemic. 20% of female children in the United States experience child sexual abuse, with 60% of those likely to face re-victimization. And although they did not put the statistics up here for boys, they said female, but please bear in mind, boys are being exploited by leaps and bounds, and the numbers are equally staggering. Human trafficking in our own state in Georgia. And you'll see the map here. And what this does is just speaks to the referrals. These are in certain regions of Georgia that just speaks to individuals who have actually called in, like mandated reporters such as myself, to say that, look, I believe that this is what's happening, and then they investigate the case and it actually was. Or some of these individuals that have been rescued out of the life. There were 30% or 30 plus referrals in this red area you see on the map. That would be Cobb County, that would be DeKalb, that would be Gwinnett, Fulton, Henry, and Clayton County. Only 30 referrals. The reality is that the numbers, of course, we really don't know, because a lot of them are not saying anything. And a lot of individuals don't know what it looked like, or they're afraid to say something. 11 to 29 referrals were in Hall County, Floyd County, Cherokee, and Paulding, Douglas, etc., Coweta, okay? 6 to 10 referrals in Lawrence County, Ware County, Thomas County, Dougherty County, Liberty, etc. And between 1 and 5 referrals, you would see the cream color there on the screen, would be Burke County, Wayne County, Long, etc. And what that means is that these are the referrals of individuals who suspect that there's domestic minor trafficking involved. But the reality is like I said, a lot of people right in our neighborhoods, they don't know what human trafficking looks like. They don't know how to identify it. So they don't report. They may see a young child with someone and it looks strange, it feels strange. Just the other day, when Tony and I were at our last class, one of the ambassadors came to me and said, what do you do in a situation where someone called her and said, I see a man, two men, and they're looking suspicious and they have a little girl with them and she looks about 5 years old. And they took turns taking this young lady, this young child to the bathroom and coming out. And then they started to order food. And she said, it felt really strange. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid. What do I do in a situation like that when I'm not certain if this was really happening? And so she told her to call 911 and she asked me, what should she have done? I said, absolutely. You call 911 if you don't know what else to do. If you see something, you say something. Well, then how then do you protect yourself and the victim or the suspected victim? Well, you don't do it in a way that they're aware of it. If you have to leave the location, but you get the license plate, you make sure that you ID the people, what they look like, you know, what they were wearing, what the child looked like. And you can always report when you suspect there is domestic minor trafficking involved or human trafficking involved, because they're not going to be able to help themselves. So it's only those of us who will report it that they rely on, that they depend on to see something and then say something. You don't have to say who you are. You can remain anonymous. And I also want the ladies and the gentlemen to know that you might say, what is the type of individual these buyers or these traffickers are looking for when they're looking for their supply? They're looking for you and me. They're looking for anyone that they have certain physical features, which is all of our beautiful features, that they can put a price tag on. If you look at your neighbor and say, okay, well, she has beautiful hair and she has straight hair, she has curly hair, she has kinky hair, she has brown eyes, she has blue eyes, she has full lips, she has brown skin, she has dark skin, she's tall, she's slender, she's thick, she's short, she's active, she's very playful, or she's withdrawn. They are looking for these types of individuals. Any type of personal characteristics that you can ID on a person, on someone that you know, your siblings, your cousins, your friends, whatever it is about them that makes them who they are, that's who these traffickers are looking for, because remember, they are looking for their next supply. They're looking for their next supply. They can sell a person, a human being, for longer and for much more money than they can drugs. So now their supply is the human being. Not selling cars, not selling houses, and even drugs, because they can sell a human being for much more and much longer than they can sell a kilo of a drug. So I paused there a little bit. The average age of a girl first sold into sex trafficking in Georgia is just 14 years old. In 2021, the Attorney General's Office, the AG's Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit, initiated 25 cases, arrested 9 individuals, investigated and prosecuted 51 defendants, and rescued and assisted 107 victims. But that is just what's on record. In 2014, Atlanta's underground sex economy was estimated to be $290 million. 54.1% of Metro Atlanta's homeless youth have experienced exploitation in their life. But again, remember, those numbers are growing because of the online exploitation and abuse. TikTok, Fortnite, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I know some of the young people can really tell me and share with us some of these different apps that are out there, because most of us that are my age are probably on Facebook. So the younger people move to different apps because they don't really want their parents to know what they're doing. So they have duplicate type of accounts. So they have their I'm so innocent account on Facebook, and then they have something else somewhere else on a different app. So anytime we think as parents that we have evolved and we're on those apps, the children are coming off of those apps. And that's where the predators are going. They're going where the children are. Yeah, because they're looking for their next supply. Yeah. Yes. So the reality is that it's not just about homeless youth, but our children in this digital age. Approximately 65% of men who purchase sex with minors in Atlanta and the suburban areas are outside of the perimeter of I-285. This is where they're making their purchases. So again, approximately 65% of men who purchase sex with minors in Atlanta live in the suburban areas outside of the I-285 perimeter. And 91% of domestic minor sex trafficking victims in Georgia were enrolled in school at the time of their exploitation. And some of them never miss school. They don't miss school. They may check in so that they are not counted absent. And at lunchtime, they leave. And they all, while they're doing that, they are recruiting other young people, boys and girls. All right, so I am going to share a short video with you just to kind of allow you to see what it looks like of sorts, the grooming process and what sexual exploitation looks like in the home.
Each person's story is made up of twists and turns on the path of life. Some places on the path are dark, some places are bright. For survivors of sexual exploitation, the path is long, heartbreaking, and complicated. Experiencing sexual exploitation doesn't come about instantly. There are many factors that lead to being exploited. It happens over time and for various reasons we call vulnerabilities. Kylie's father left when she was a baby, and her mother had been addicted to drugs since as long as she can remember. She could never hold a job, so homelessness is their way of life. They needed money, so Kylie's mom sold her for sex. She said it's not a big deal, it's just what we do to survive. Jamal thought he was safe. His grandma is just down the hall watching TV. But being safe is just an illusion. Jamal's uncle walks in his bedroom. He tries to disappear and can't. Tara wishes someone cared. Her parents work around the clock and always seemed too busy for her. Tara's happy place was her phone, a whole other world. She logs into her Instagram account and sees a message from an older guy. He flatters her with messages of how pretty she is, and they start chatting. Natalia works hard at the local convenience store, but lives paycheck to paycheck. At the end of the month, she has to decide between paying rent or paying for groceries. Her toddler is crying. He is hungry. Truth is, so is Natalia. They haven't had a hearty meal in days. Natalia decides to call that old boyfriend and take him up on his offer. Survivors of sexual exploitation have experienced the worst of humanity and have complex trauma from a series of hardships. The only way to get past the traumatic wounds and perpetual roadblocks is through healthy, sustainable resources. Each Wellspring Living program stands on 5 critical service pillars that produce healing, stability, and hope. Because trafficked or at-risk youth and women generally have a history of truancy, education is a pillar which ensures our participants are on the road to long-term success. Each program has a unique focus on education depending on where their participants are in both their educational journeys and overall life stages. All programs focus on whether or not participants have their GED or high school diplomas and assist in goal setting, as well as provide comprehensive, tailored resources to accomplish this important achievement. Case management, which focuses on the participants' expressed needs and concerns, leads to developing their individualized service plan. The needs are great, from food and clothing to connections to housing resources and medical care. Case managers in each program ensure that participants are empowered throughout their stay to make their own decisions about their needs and treatment, and see that they receive assistance to fulfill the requests. Every program offers a variety of therapeutic services to each participant. These services aim to reduce clinical symptoms such as paranoia, disordered eating, and excessive anger, and provide participants tools to help increase autonomy, self-sufficiency, resiliency, and overall positive well-being. Life Skills creates challenging but supportive programming on topics such as cooking, budgeting, and creative writing. Life skills classes are an important part of preparing each survivor for their transition back into the community and provide the necessary building blocks to increase participants' self-esteem, self-advocacy, and independence. Trafficking survivors and those at risk often lack marketable career skills and struggle to attain long-term sustainable living wage employment. The final pillar, career readiness, puts an emphasis on access to employment training, which dramatically affects an individual's self-confidence, social mobility, and financial stability. Each program helps participants in obtaining various types of career readiness training depending on where they are on their career paths and overall life stages. Participants receive personalized support, accounting for their skills, experience, aptitudes, and career goals. Each of these 5 pillars make up the critical structure for holistic transformation to happen. This prioritized and consistent foundation for success gives every survivor in a Wellspring Living program the essential tools they need to help them heal, grow, and thrive in life. All of these pillars work together to build up each individual and prepare them for creating a healthy, productive life for themselves. From rescue to restoration, it's a hard journey for survivors looking for hope, working through the pain, believing in themselves. Through every chance, every opportunity, every dream, survivors inch closer to the light and to a life that is brighter than ever before.
All right. So with that said, what to do if you suspect someone may be a victim? If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, call 911. Call 911. And also, you guys, you can take a snapshot of what's on the screen. And you can equally call Georgia's statewide anti-trafficking hotline at 1-866-363-4842. That's 1-866-363-4842. Showing that video just speaks to how important it is that if you see something, say something so that these individuals can get the help that they need and they can be connected to one of the amazing organizations such as Wellspring Living. Because I wish that along the way, I had a program like Wellspring Living. I'm so blessed though, because I had individuals in church and there were different programs and like Hear and Be Healed, deliverance programs, and women that would mentor me, and I would volunteer for different things, you know, with the youth. So my healing and my deliverance sprang forth. Equally, it would have been so great to have a program like this where I could get some of the assistance that I needed when I was going through the struggle that I was going through at different junctures of my life. Because when you are sexually exploited or victimized in any way, it can take a toll on you. There's trauma associated with it. And so these individuals that once, you know, it's been identified, you get them into a safe space so that they can get the help that they need. All right, so now it's time for our questions. Anyone have any questions? Any burning desires? Anything that you would like to talk about?
I don't have any questions, but that was a wealth of information, and especially just kind of seeing how the recruiting part was, even the father using the daughter to recruit boys to come up to the house. And, you know, I guess those kind of things, you really don't even think about that kind of stuff. So yeah, but it's really important though to, you know, like to know what your child doing and where they're going. Cause I know my son always say I watch too much TV, but you know, some of these shows, these Law and Order and Criminal Minds, all this thing is part of reality. Some of this stuff is real true experience. Cause I know when my son used to want to go spend all night over people's house, I'd be like, do they got any uncles and stuff that stay there? Because see, I don't know, you know, cause I'm calling him like all the time when he's spending the night over people's house, because I'm like, I don't know people, you know, and I just don't know if, you know, his uncle might be over there, I don't know. I always tell him, you know, if it looks suspicious or whatever, you know, things like that, call me. But, you know, I'm gonna call him anyway. But, and also I wanted to say that, you know, I work for a lobbyist firm, and Grace Commission is one of the things that Marty Kemp does with the about sex trafficking also. But Brian Kemp just signed into law on Tuesday a bill that increases penalties for businesses failing to post trafficking notices in their business. So places like truck stops, bars, adult entertainment, business, hospital, airports, rail and bus station, hotels, government buildings have to now post sex trafficking signs, just like if you did like labor and law in your building, in your office. So I think that's a good start too with the sex trafficking.
Absolutely. And yes, definitely when our First Lady, Marty Kemp, the Grace Commission was introduced, actually one of the other organizations that I'm aligned with, and I'm gonna just go ahead and say that Street Grace,
I'm familiar with that
legislative aspect of that. So my ministry, we're aligned with them as well, because prevention is better than cure.
Right.
And we do need legislation that will have teeth associated with it.
Right.
For instance, some of the bills that have been passed that have become law is where those buyers, once they have been found guilty or indicted, then they're not just getting that tap on the hand and they get out overnight. But now it's a felony.
Right.
And in the buyers as well, they're not just going to jail and then getting out overnight, so that they can say, well, if my wife or a male, a female, if my husband notices that I'm gone, you know, maybe you can make an excuse for 24 hours. But if you then have to go to court because this is a felony indictment against you, you're going to have to explain that. If you have to pay, you know, a fine of $50,000 or more, you're going to have to explain that. That's not so easy to explain. So to the point that you made, our First Lady, Marty Kemp, is doing amazing work in this area. And, you know, the Street Grace, which I spoke to as well, they actually, you know, go in and they train law enforcement.
Right. Yeah, and I know sometimes they go to a lot of the street, Grace do go to a lot of churches too.
Yeah.
And you could be a part of it, as your church could be a part of where they train community on things like that as well.
Absolutely. And I'm a part of that. I'm a part of their speakers bureau.
Okay.
Yeah, and they just had advocacy day. So there were certain bills, and we were going to our legislators to present different bills. There's another bill that was just that they're trying to get passed to become law. I don't have it with me off the top of my head, but to the point that you're making, yeah, and that's a part of this movement. This is a part of the eradication of the commercial sexual exploitation of children. This is a part of demanding that end, is to say something if you see something, and as well making sure that there are laws in place that are going to have teeth to prosecute these traffickers and these buyers, not just the traffickers, but the buyers as well. And to then emancipate the young people who then sometimes their record is tarnished because they want to blame them for what has happened to them.
So here's my question real quick. If you, like you said, if you think somebody may be in trouble or like that looks suspicious, suspicious that that man is with that girl, or she looks like she's been forced somewhere, but not really pulling back or anything. So you said it's better to be safe and call 911 and let them say, oh, it's not that, then not do anything, and then she in this way of life for a while, right?
That's correct, because we can never assume, and remember that we are all they have to depend on for help.
Our eyes, yep.
That's it. I will speak to a situation where I was out and I was evangelizing, because I have an outreach ministry. So we were out evangelizing, and we were in an apartment complex in East Point. And I won't say exactly what that is, of course, but like I said, you're not going to see the face of exploitation and trafficking has changed so much. And it's not just the major hotel chains that they are exploiting individuals out of, or minor, whatever that looks like, what they would call traps, but apartment complexes, Airbnbs and things like that. And they have these different regions, and they're literally set up. This is big business for them. And so as we were going from door to door, doing outreach, across, when you see a corridor of apartment complexes, and we were like on the second or third floor, and we could see all the way across to the other apartment other building. And a young lady began to scream. Immediately, my ears were open, and it was completely quiet on that floor. She was screaming so loud, I know that you could hear her down the street at the MARTA station. And a guy then grabbed her mouth, and he drug her into an apartment, and she was screaming for help. No one heard, no one helped immediately. Now, it's important not to put that person at risk or put yourself at risk. In that moment, I had a moment, and I said, stop. And as we were looking over the balcony, which I didn't know anyone was down there, because my vision, I was focused on what was happening in front of me. And a guy was at the bottom on the street with his trunk open, his back door open. And he looked up and he said, can I help you? And I was with another lady. He said, can I help you? And we said, oh, I said, no, thank you. So that's one of the situations where, of course, on my app, as a mandated reporter, I reported it. And I also called 911. And you don't allow them to tell you. If they want to ask you, you definitely want to ID as much as you possibly can. What did he look like? What does she look like? The location, the address, and all of that. But you don't have to give them your name, and they must come out to check on it. So your keywords are, this person looks like they're in trouble. They looks like they could be being trafficked. They looks like domestic violence, whatever terminology you know to say that someone is in danger. They are supposed to come out. And so after that, after I made my report, so I had to leave because now this man said, can I help you? So I had to leave because of course you want to stay safe. You never want to give out your name or information. You don't stay on the scene. You go ahead and leave because you don't want to put yourself at risk and you don't want to put that person at more risk. You want the police to come out and handle it. So when I left, they had guys stationed within the parking lot and they were acting like they were casual, but it wasn't casual. They had their back doors open and they were standing. And I saw a police car, so the police did come. The police car was backed in. But when we came into that complex to start our evangelism, you know, our team for outreach that day, it was completely quiet in that complex. We didn't see anybody, you know, people were coming and going, just it's normal. But all of a sudden, it looks like they had them stationed on each corner within that parking lot. And so I got out. They didn't know if it was me because immediately, you know, couldn't recognize me or ID me. But immediately, you know, when I left, and I didn't alert the individual who lived there because I wouldn't want her to be a target. So this is how serious this is, because you're messing with these people's, what they would consider their supply, which is their money. And that's human beings. And so I got out and I then did, Tony, what one of the officers talked to us about, going past your home instead of going straight to your home. I just went to a whole different location, you know, and I said, if I had to, and I see someone trailing me, because I did see someone look like they were following me, I just went to a whole different place. And I guess when they saw that, oh, she's not going to go directly to a specific place, they left, they just went on. So this is how serious this is. So it is important when you do see something, you do say something, but make sure that you are being mindful and taking care of yourself as well.
Awesome. Well, lots of good information. And I want to thank you for sharing. And did any of the girls have any questions? Mari, Anaya, anyone before? You guys, Amari?
No, I don't have no questions, but I understood everything she was saying. And yeah, everything just made sense and she gave good explanation. Yeah.
Okay,
Good,
cool.
good. And also, if you're on your way to college or you're in college, that's another breeding ground for trafficking. The sororities are breeding grounds for trafficking. And I won't mention the specific colleges, but there's been one and they were on the news. And I also want to say religious organizations, huge for sexual exploitation. It's huge. So it's everywhere. We can't just say it's in one place, but it's everywhere. But I particularly want, you know, the young people, please be aware of your surroundings and who you're connecting with, because we know that you socialize a lot online, but that is where these traffickers are right now. That's what they're doing, because they don't want you to know who they are. And once they lure the individual out, they're not going to ask for your permission, and they will take your phone, even if you have a tracker on your phone, which is great. But guess what? That phone is in that parking lot. It's not going with you. And they have these soundproof vehicles, you know, so if you say, well, that scares me, good, great, because this is real and it's really happening out there, you know, and you're going to continue, you want to continue to live your life and have fun and all of these things, but please be mindful. And it is not the typical old creepy man. It is football players, cheerleaders, the popular that you would think are popular kids that are grooming and recruiting. And I don't know if some of the young people know, they call it sugaring. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with those terms, but I know that maybe some of my peers would know what they would say sugar daddies or sugar mamas, but the young people are calling it sugaring now. But it's just another form of sexual exploitation and commercial sex trafficking.
Oh, well, that's, like I said, that's lots of information. It's good information. And I do thank you for coming out and sharing this. I'm sure we all have taken something away and it make us more aware. So I appreciate you coming out and sharing this with us.
And thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share this information, because this is exactly what it takes for us to become aware. And even though it is a lot of information, but just knowing that your eyes are open now to be able to see. And if you would like to get involved with Street Grace or Wellspring Living, that's their presentation today. I've given Tony some information on how to, their information so you can connect, but equally, because I am using Wellspring Living's information here, just knowing what their mission is, and that is to transform the lives of those at risk or victimized by sexual exploitation. And of course, I concur and agree. And their vision is to see a world, which I know that we all can attest to this and we can all agree with, that to see a world where every victim of sexual exploitation has access to transformative care. So that means you have to, if you see something, you say something. And then areas that you can volunteer. There's so many different areas where you can volunteer. So if you like, you can take a snapshot of the areas of volunteerism where you can volunteer. You can do one-time serve days. So that is if you sign up or you decide that you would like to volunteer with Wellspring Living, there are different areas. They have so many different ways that you can actually volunteer. Ongoing program support. They have retail stores. They have the Speakers Bureau, which I am a part of, my ministry. And their treasure store. So if you have items, gently used items, that you would like to donate, that's another way to support. Wellspring Living has 2 locations, one in Peachtree City and one in Duluth. And the action steps, and of course that would be to sign up for the monthly virtual volunteer information sessions. And of course, Sister Tony asked me to come out and share this information with you, but if you wanted to organize through them, you can do that. And just to kind of give you a little bit more information on Wellspring Living, for over 21 years, Wellspring Living has been providing comprehensive care for survivors of sexual exploitation and those at risk. Okay, so again, thank you so much for having me, and you can take a snapshot of the development director's information here if you wanted to get connected to Wellspring Living. All right, Sister Tony, thank you so much. And I'm hugging you, hugs. All right, ladies, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have fun on your trip.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Be safe.
Keisha,
Be
Keisha's
safe.
about to go on a 15-day cruise, you guys. Keep her in
Oh,
prayer.
wow. Be safe. Be
Even
safe.
from
Have
California to
fun.
Hawaii.
Yes, and
Oh,
you know
wow.
what? The beautiful part is his ministry is always at the core of that. So that evangelistic movement is always a part of the things that we do. So it's amazing.
All right. Well, you have fun.
Well, thank you. All
And
right.
thank you
Yeah,
again.
have a good time.